My name is Craig Johnson. I am the author of the Walt Longmire Mystery Series, and I live in Ucross, Wyoming, population 25. 23 tonight because Judy and I are here. And I always try and think of a story that's going to encompass a little bit of what my life is like right now. And there's one story that immediately comes to mind. It happened about a couple of years back. What happened was we were actually beginning a tour. And when we start our tours, we generally start them over at the Buffalo Bill Museum over in Cody, which is a really wonderful Western museum. If you get a chance, try and get over there. And so we were heading up from there to get on a plane in Billings, Montana, because my wife won't fly on the planes that fly out of northern Wyoming, because they're the kind where they hand you a pair of goggles and a leather helmet and say jump on when it starts moving. And so we're on our way up to Billings to jump on a plane and we stop in a little town called Red Lodge, Montana. And so we go in and we have lunch, and I get to go over and write the check for lunch. It kind of gives you an indication of what kind of a place it is. You can still write a check for lunch. And so I go over there, and when I'm not wearing one of these, I'm wearing one of those Absaroka County Sheriff's Department ball caps that come off of our website from the store, which I call the Walmart. And if you didn't know there was no 24th county in Wyoming, if you didn't know there was no such thing as Absaroka County, they look pretty real. Okay, so I've got that ball cap on, and I'm writing the check, and the woman behind the counter goes, "Where'd you get that at?" And she said it real aggressive, and I thought she thinks I'm a sheriff's deputy. Somebody's dying in a ditch, and I'm going to have to go chase somebody down the main street of Red Lodge with a pair of cowboy boots on. And so I look at her, and I pointed at my head, and I said, "It's not a real county." And she goes, "The hell it's not, it's Walt Longmire's county." So I felt like I'd been smacked, and I looked at her and I go, "Well, I'm Craig Johnson," and she goes, "So?" I said, "Well, I'm the guy that writes the books." She goes, "What books?" That was when that little voice at the back of my head said, "You should just take whatever shreds of dignity you got and just get the hell out of here is what you should do at this point." But my pride wouldn't let me do it, So I said, "Well, the books that the TV show is based off of." And I'll never forget what she said. She looks at me and she goes, "What? There are books?" I told Viking Penguin, I said, "When I go on tour from now on, that is going to be our motto from now on. Yes, there are books." I'm carrying that with me wherever I go. But it wasn't always that way. Whenever I started out, it was kind of interesting, because I like a lot of you, that I sat down and I started on this novel. I had this idea. And people always ask me that question. They always say, "How did you get started as an author?" And there are only two honest answers to that question, as you all know. One is you stumble across an idea, a story that you think is something different, something new, something that maybe hasn't been done to death. You think, okay. And then number two, you run out of excuses is what happens. And I finally run out of excuses. I got a ranch up and going. I had Judy's store built. I had one of those dads that thought you were like slave labor until you escaped, on the Freedom Train. And so, I got all these things all up and going and everything, and then finally came home and sat down and wrote, the first two chapters of The Cold Dish, the very first book in the Walt Longmire series. And they were horrible. They were really, really bad. And I tried to think, about, what was wrong with them, why did they stink as badly as they did? And it kind of came back pretty reasonably quickly. It was the fact that, I didn't have enough, primary research material to be able to write this book. I wanted to write this book about the sheriff of the least populated county in the least populated state in America. And I didn't know enough about sheriffing. That was going to be a problem. So I needed to go talk to a sheriff. Primary research material. Go talk to a sheriff. So I drove the 18 miles into Buffalo, Wyoming, the county seat of Johnson County. And I go in there, and this is before 9/11, so there's no bulletproof glass, there's no, computer rooms or anything like that. And so I go into the sheriff's office, and there's a wooden counter. And then at the end of the hallway, I can see a guy's boots up on a desk, at the end of the hallway. And so I knock on the counter like that, and this voice goes, "What?" And I said, "Hey, Sheriff, can I talk to you for a minute?" This fellow comes out, it's a fellow by the name of Larry Kirkpatrick. He'd been the sheriff there for dozens of years there in Johnson County. And so he comes out, and I'm kind of judging his age. I didn't want a 6-week wonder. I wanted a guy with some stories, some seasoning, And so he comes over, and I said, "Hey, my name is Craig Johnson. I've got a little ranch out near Ucross, Wyoming, and I've got this murder mystery about a Wyoming sheriff that I'm writing, and I was wondering if you would be able to help me out." And he said, well, come on back to my office. So I walked back in his office, and I got to tell you that I've been in a lot of sheriff's offices in the last 12 years, purely on a professional basis. And I go in there, and he's got bookshelves in his office. And I got to tell you, not all sheriffs have bookshelves in their offices. Like I said, this was a good sign. I thought, okay, so I sit down and I talk with him for a little bit, and he says, I don't know how much help I'm going to be to you. I've never done anything like this before. And I said, well, I'm not looking for literary criticism here. I'm looking for how, a rural sheriff would process a homicide investigation. He said, well, I don't know how much help I'll be, but I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a try. And so I walked out of that office, with this idea that I had solved my problems, that they were all fixed. I got all my ducks in a row and everything was going to be okay. So much so that I went home and added on to my house. And then I built a barn and a shop and loading chutes, corral. And Judy had another store she opened. I went and tore that, opera house out, looked at it and rebuilt it, got it all up going. And came back out one day and sat down in the office there at the ranch and pulled open the third drawer down on the left-hand side, and those two lonely little chapters of The Cold Dish were looking up at me, and 9.5 years had gone by. Yeah, so I don't want to hear you that crap about writer's block, okay? So I pulled those two lonely little chapters out and I look at them, and they were just as bad as I remembered them being from 10 years previous. And I thought, you're going to have to go reintroduce yourself to that sheriff all over again. That's what you're going to have to do. And I hadn't met him. I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years, but I voted for him 3 times. So I knew he was still the sheriff, So it gave me hope, and so, I hadn't worked up the nerve like that, but I went into town one day, and I was putting gas in my truck, and I'm standing there at the pump island putting gas in the truck, and I look across the pump island, and this police cruiser pulls in on the other side of the pump island. This guy gets out, and he starts putting gas into his cruiser, and he turns around, he leans against his cruiser, and he drops his Ray-Bans down on his nose, and pops his hat back like this, and folds his arms, and he's looking at me. And he's giving me a look that we all saw this weekend. It was one of those looks that said, what did I arrest you for, and when was it? And so I thought this is going to be even more embarrassing than I thought, because it's going to be in public. And so I stepped across the pump island, I stuck out my hand, and I said, Sheriff Kirkpatrick, you're probably not going to remember me. He goes, your name's Craig Johnson. You're the one that's got the little ranch out near Ucross. You're the one writing the murder mystery about the Wyoming sheriff. This was a 5-minute conversation from almost 10 years previous. And I looked at him and I said, that is absolutely amazing. And he goes, yeah, if you don't mind me saying so, this book's going kind of slow. Well, that pissed me off. It's true, but it still pissed me off. So that's when I sat down and really got started on The Cold Dish. Really got started and thought, okay, I'm gonna write this book. So I jumped in there and I really got into it and got it done about 6 months later And Walt was a different kind of, I thought, kind of protagonist. He's what I tend to refer to as over. He's overweight, he's overage, he's overly depressed, but he still gets up in the morning and tries to do the job. And so, to me, that made him more of a true kind of heroism that I enjoyed being with. But of course, the next thing that I did, of course, was turn around and send. When I got that manuscript done, I sent it off. I sent it off to my brother. I sent it off to my mother and father. And to see what they thought about it. And I think I waited a full 48 hours before I started badgering them with phone calls as to whether or not they'd read the manuscript or not. And so, anyway, I called up my brother and I said, hey, have you read that manuscript that I sent over? And he goes, yeah, I haven't. You're dead. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, Craig, the old sheriff that Walt goes and plays chess with on Tuesday nights, Lucian Connolly, that's our dad. I was like, crap, I thought I hit that really well. He goes, no, he looks like Dad, he acts like Dad, he talks like Dad. The only thing he did was cut off one of his legs, and I don't think that's going to fool Dad. So I said, I gotta go. And he goes, I bet you do. And so I hung up with him. Of course, one of my favorite quotes is from Wallace Stegner's Writing and Teaching Fiction, where he says the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off of anybody alive or dead. Boy, in this room, I can tell you what a crock that is, right? So I call up my mother and father. My mother answers the phone. She's always the one that answers the phone. And so I said, Mom, you guys had a chance to read that manuscript I sent her? She goes, oh, honey, I'm halfway through. It's so good. She's my mom, what's she gonna say, right? And I said, has Dad read any of the book? And she's like, oh yeah, he's about 2/3 of the way through. And I'm like, he's definitely read the Lucian parts. Look at, so I'm trying to think how I'm gonna ask this next question, right? And that's when my mother comes back on the phone and she goes, honey, your father thinks he's Walt Longmire. Now, those of you who've read my books or even seen the television show know how far apart those two characters are, right? And so I'm trying to think how I'm going to ask this next question, and that's when my mother comes back on the phone and she says, let's not disabuse him of that thought, shall we? So my father went to his grave pretty sure, that he was Walt Longmire. Anyway, I delivered, the book, to an agent there in New York, and her first remark was, and I got to tell you this, the first draft of The Cold Dish was actually 650 pages long. It was like War and Peace in Absaroka County, is what it was like. And her remark to me was, if I have to deliver this in a wheelbarrow, it's not going to get published, okay? So I kind of had to cut it down a little bit, to make it, more reasonable. And amazingly enough, it got picked up by Viking Penguin. And it was really interesting because I'd written The Cold Dish just as a standalone novel. It was just supposed to be a standalone Western novel, right? And it was funny because, it was Catherine Court, the president of Penguin, that sat me down at lunchtime, and she had the arc of The Cold Dish sitting there between us, and she said, we would like some more of these. And I said, well, I'm happy to write you guys some more books. I've got some more ideas. And she goes, no, I don't think you understand. We think these characters, the relationships, the place, we think people are going to want more of these characters. And that's when I, with the knowledge of not even having had a book published, started arguing with the president of Penguin. And going, I really don't think that'll work. This is, but I got some other ideas I want to bounce off of you. And she goes, why don't you go back to your ranch in Wyoming and sit down and think about this, And so I did, and I thought, okay, well, I already cut 300 pages out of the first book, so probably there are some more stories and some more characters, and so maybe I will go ahead and give it a shot. And so I did, and that's how the series actually got off on its way. And I'm actually got the 13th book actually coming out in September. But we also had a number of wonderful things happen along the way. I had the very first library that got in touch with me to ever do an event, because I'd never been asked anything by a library other than to go shh like this. And so this library over in